Hey y'all, welcome to another day of Vlogmas 2025. So today we're going to do a react to the origins of A Christmas Carol from the British Library.
In 1843, Dickens was horrified by reading a government report. It was, in fact, the second parliamentary report, the Parliamentary Commission on the Employment.
Guys, where is the Dickens Museum? Is that in London or is it somewhere else? Because I definitely want to visit that. Please let me know in the comments.
Of women and children, showing the horrific conditions under which very young children were made to work underground or to work tremendously long hours in appalling conditions in factories. Dickens read this and he described himself as being perfectly stricken down by it. And he determined that he would strike, as he said, the heaviest blow in my power on behalf of these victims of the Industrial Revolution.
I have to say that I wholeheartedly agree with him on that. Every time I hear a story about it, I know that's how things were done, and I know we obviously don't practice that now. Well, there's laws against it in the US. I get a knot in my stomach when I hear those stories, just because I just in general, I always have a soft spot for when children are treated poorly or mistreated or abused in any way. I am a parent, but also because they're kids and they don't know any better, and that shouldn't be their reality, right? I definitely feel Dickens on that one.
In October 1843, he was giving a talk in Manchester. It was in the course of giving this talk in this large industrial city that the idea came to him that the best thing he could do would be by writing a story rather than an article, something that would strike the heaviest blow in my power, as he said, something that would come down with sledgehammer force. And this was the conception of the Christmas Carol, beginning, of course, with the conception of Scrooge. That wonderful name, Scrooge, a combination of screw and gouge.
I wasn't expecting that. I love that. That was hilarious.
The idea of Scrooge as the ultimate miser, the ultimate loner who had no feelings for the rest of humanity except as to how much money he could make out of them. Then he had the concept of the three spirits by which in one night Scrooge was to be converted from his extreme misanthropy to great benevolence and love of humanity. Scrooge is visited by three ghosts. The ghost of Christmas past takes him back into his childhood and his young manhood, shows him the suffering that he himself underwent as a child. There's a particularly poignant scene where he's left alone in this barren, horrible schoolroom. Well, all the other children have gone home for the Christmas holidays. And Dickens writes, Scrooge sat down and wept to see his former self as he had used to be. He begins with pity for himself.
That is a very poignant point, right? Where it shows his origin of being hurt and being left out and being basically let down for a long time as a child, pretty much is what leads to him feeling like it's okay to hurt others. That what is it? Can't speak today. That old adage of you can't, that what is the old adage?
Scrooge, in the present, as it were, is horrified to see himself becoming, in the past, more and more miserly. Then the second visitor is the ghost of Christmas present, this great jolly giant sitting on a great mound of turkeys and Christmas pudding. Shows Scrooge the home life of his own poor clerk, whom he pays starvation wages to, 15 shillings a week, and Bob Cratchit, his family of several children, including, of course, the crippled child, Tiny Tim, and he has to keep them on this meager wage. But The Ghost of Christmas Present shows Scrooge the family happiness at Christmas, and Scrooge is shown a very devoted and faithful employee despite the terrible way Scrooge treats him, even raises a glass to toast Mr. Scrooge. And Scrooge is filled with pity. He has this nostalgia, first of all, about his own past and before he became corrupt, as it were, then pity for the Cratchits in the present. And then the third, the most frightening, of course, of the ghosts, the one who doesn't speak, is the ghost of Christmas yet to come, this dark shadow who shows Scrooge visions of the horrible, bleak, desolate death of an unnamed man who has cut himself off from all humanity and dies in solitude.
Why do they always say the ghost of Christmas yet to come instead of the ghost of Christmas future?
The third great component is fear. So there's nostalgia, pity, and fear. And these things work on Scrooge to convert him so that when he wakes up the next morning, he has been converted, of course, from this horrible old miser to one of the most benevolent and loving and outgoing of all possible human beings. And this is the very well-known story of the Christmas Carol, which gives us this wonderful story about how we can all change and become something much better. Dickens said that he composed it in a kind of frenzy, walking about the black streets of London night after night, composing this story in his mind, getting it written in time for publication just immediately after Christmas 1843. Wanted it to be a very attractive little book, so he wanted his publishers to spare no expense. This included colored illustrations, hand-painted illustrations, which was, of course, enormously expensive. So that there was a contradiction there. I mean, Dickens wanted the book to reach the poorest readers, but it would be impossible for the publishers to publish it at less than 5 shillings, which was an enormous sum, of course, for a working-class family to afford.
That is kind of the mind of an artist.
The illustrator was the very distinguished and famous artist John Leech, who was the leading illustrator on the great comic magazine Punch, and a very, very close friend of Dickens. One of the most powerful illustrations is the illustration of the terrible children. They're just called Ignorance and Want, with whom the Ghost of Christmas Present confronts Scrooge at the end of that section of the carol, just before the Ghost of Christmas Present. The Ghost of Christmas Present is about to leave him when he notices these rather claw-like feet, skin and bone as it were, sticking out from under the robes of the ghost, who then reveals these 2 terrible children, wolfish, scowling, desperate. The Ghost of Christmas Present tells Scrooge, beware of these children and all of their degree. He's hinting at some terrible outbreak of revolution. So on. And this was very much a fear of the 1850s, the Hungry Forties as they were known, that there might occur in England some kind of revolution as there had occurred in France in the previous century. And what is very interesting is that Leech, this is not in the text, he adds this himself, the background to this scene where Scrooge confronts these 2 children is factory chimneys, factories. The scene's supposed to take place in London, not in Manchester. But Leech, mindful, I suppose, or having talked to Dickens about the horror of the report of the exploitation of children in mines and manufactories, does have these factory chimneys behind, which is in this scene, which is very telling, I think.
2 things about that. Number 1, were there not factories in London at that time, Benny? I don't know. I thought there were, but perhaps I'm misunderstanding some of the Industrial Revolution. That's entirely possible, obviously, because I didn't really learn that much about the Industrial Revolution outside of the United States. A little bit, but not a ton. Not details like that, probably. And the other thing is, I remember that portion of the book when we studied it when I was in middle school. And that part of the book always really struck me. I mean, that's something that I still remember to this day. And I noticed that a lot of the movie adaptations do not include that in their scripts, right? It's rarely included. Most of the time it's left out. To me, that's a really important point of the book, and I always got really annoyed that it's not included. I feel like it's really important, and definitely hearing the history of it, I now triple down on the fact that it's enormously important and it should be included in any of the adaptations. But I guess the powers that be don't want it to, because then, it might remind people that they can revolt and stuff. I don't know. And a lot of the stuff that he's saying a lot of the stuff that Mr. Slater is saying as well in this about how Dickens saw the world, like what he thought England was turning into at the time, is really, really relevant in 2025. And that is scary as hell.
The thing was written in just a few weeks, and it was published, sold out immediately, and was a huge, huge success. It was reviewed everywhere and universally praised. Thackeray, Dickens's great rival as a novelist, said in his review of The Christmas Carol, "It seems to me a national benefit, and to every man and woman who reads it, a personal kindness." It sold one edition after another. Of course, was put on the stage. Dickens couldn't control this. I mean, there was no copyright protection in those days, so that dramatists were free to seize on the work of novelists and turn them into plays and put them on the stage. And I think there were about 5 different versions of the carol running at the different London theatres within weeks of the publication. He had hoped that the carol would earn him a great deal of money, but in fact the costs of production were so enormous that his profit in the end was very little. He could do nothing to stop the pirates who he tried. He went to law to stop the pirated versions of the carol. But because copyright laws were so weak in those days, he couldn't do anything about it. And he lost the case.
That is crazy. That's so crazy when you think about it, because it's such a masterpiece and it's just it's been done so many times and it's in so many different formats and genres and mediums and in so many different interpretations. Wow. I mean, obviously, he's not gonna get royalties from it now, but I mean, it could have been like a family legacy. It's still a family legacy. I'm not taking that away. Well, it's freaking Christmas Carol, of course. Just I'm saying monetarily wise, he might have been able to actually like impact the moment, which is what he ultimately wanted to do.
Seeing lots and lots of people making lots and lots of money out of the carol, but he himself not at all making as much as he thought. However, it did hugely increase the intensity of that love affair that was, the most important in Dickens's life, and that love affair between himself and his public, that relationship that he called personally affectionate and like no other man. And the carol contributed hugely, of course, to this.
I was really informative, and yeah, it brought back some things about it, definitely. But wow, interesting. I'm still blown away by the fact that he didn't get to make any money really off of it. But it does come down to the fact that he didn't, because he was so adamant about how it was going to be presented and produced. But it would have had the same impact if it wasn't that particular and had the color illustrations and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, definitely a timeless classic, of course, and definitely something that we can all take lessons from every single friggin' day, even in 2025. So yeah, I'm curious what your favorite rendition of A Christmas Carol, aka Scrooge, is. Of all, through all of them, do you prefer the book? Do you prefer any of the movies? Which movie do you prefer? Do you prefer to watch it on stage? I'm an art person. I like live stuff better. So for me, the stage version is always best, but it is sometimes can be a little bit campy. So I like some of the film versions, and I do think that, well, Muppets Christmas Carol is our favorite film version, but I do think some of the older classic film versions do it the best. They're curious what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. Happy Vlogmas. See you next time.